Hello there, and welcome back to the Agostinho Zinga Show, episode number 678, with your host, Agostinho Zinga. This is the Agostinho Zinga Show, episode number 678, with your host, Agostinho Zinga, and I hope you are doing well wherever this lovely pod may find you. I hope you are doing swimmingly. How am I? All good, all things considered. I cannot lie, I cannot hate, I cannot stunt. All good things, all good on my end, all things considered. You may be seeing me in some bit of light now. I did go out and actually improve my equipment and bought myself a nice little light bar, so there should be some good light coming in from this way if you're watching it via the video side of things. If you're listening to it via the audio side of things, why don't you check the video portion out of the show and see me in somewhat full HD. I did try and upgrade my setup and use the light bar with my flipping webcam, my little trusty Logitech. What is it? This is the legendary one, isn't it? So I think it's like the C920, but for some reason mine broke. I was using it for a while, so I guess sometimes maybe the cabling or something inside's gone on it. It's gone kaput, no more blue lights, not plug it in, so I'm just gonna have to use my iPhone for now, as I'm doing personally, but I'll end up getting this repaired again. But just like, that's what happens, isn't it? You end up buying equipment to boost the stream, using the equipment you already have, then the equipment you already have breaks. And then but I bought this ages ago. I remember this was a thing that I bought time ago, which I'd never really used to full extent. If you look back at some of the earlier videos on my channel, you'll see this was used pretty well, because I think I was doing a lot of video streaming in a day, so with daylight and shit, it picked me up well. But then when I was using it at night, it wasn't the best, because it doesn't really have good, doesn't really capture people well at night, so you need light bars and LEDs and shit. And I didn't use it for a while, so I'd switched to my iPhone, because the iPhone's got a pretty good lens, like the one I'm using now, so it can kind of, it kind of takes in a lot of light, so there is an ability to kind of film these things when there's not a lot of natural light coming in. And I remember when I did buy this, there was a worldwide shortage of these Logitech cameras. I remember this might have been just before the pandemic started. There was a big, if you guys remember, those of you who remember in the chat, those of you who listen to this after the fact, you'll remember there was a bit of a hustle going on with people selling these on Amazon. These are one of the products people would be selling for like 2 times the value or whatnot, because, basically everyone was working from home, but no one had working from home equipment. So they'd be going out and buying microphones or whatever, laptop stands and, webcams. And these were selling like hotcakes. And it got to a point where these little Logitech webcams were selling for like 2-3 times the value, which you shouldn't buy them for, because I think retail of this is like £60-70 here in the UK. You shouldn't be paying anything more than that for this anyway, but people were just buying them, off rip and going flipping crazy. But anyway, what can we do? LED bars here, we're using that for the moment. It's going to improve my time when I'm kind of streaming. It's going to make me sweat a bit more. So if you're wondering, or if you're curious about seeing what my MDMA sweat looks like, you're gonna see it now with these flipping bars over here. So big up the MDMA sweats when you're not on MDMA, which is kind of my life really, isn't it? Looking sweaty and clammy, even though most of the time I'm not on drugs, which is really horrible. It's probably better to actually be high and actually be tripping balls and look sweaty than I do. A little jog down the street and I'm flipping covered in fucking water all over my face. I'm getting onto a train covered in water, on my bike covered in water, running covered in water, grabbing some waters off of the fucking shelf covered in water. Where it's better if I was tripping, but people just look at me thinking, why is that guy so leaky and wet? I'm like, guys, I can explain, but then your hands are covered in water, you don't touch people when they're running away from you. So it's a bit of a mad one. But anyway, big up everybody that's tuning in. Appreciate all of you for hanging in there with me. I know it's been a while. Apologize for the absence, but guys got a life. You got to live as well in that, everyday life and all that malarkey. You can't be, on the interwebs every single day, which I probably am anyway when I'm not streaming, but hey, it is what it is. But thank you anyway for those of you who are tuning in live. I appreciate every single one of you. So loads of to get in on quickly. To start with, I'm going to just run through these topics I've got here on the flipping Agostinho Zinga Show. And those of you who are watching this live and you're wanting to hear a random show, please come back in about an hour and a half. I'll have a random show for you guys, because there's loads of stuff I need to catch up on the comedy side of things. So random show should be starting about an hour and a half, and then I'll kind of run through all these topics I've got to talk about culturally on the Agostinho Zinga Show for you. So if you want comedy, all that good stuff, then come back in an hour and a half and I'll have that for you. But if you want to stay, you're more than welcome as well. So big up the chat, big up everybody that's hanging in there. I appreciate you all. Big up Natashki. What have I been doing? Yeah, nothing really, to be fair. I've not been doing anything. I'm not gonna lie. I went out to the movies. Obviously, I spoke to you guys about that. I tried to actually go to Bert Kreischer's premiere for his movie, The Machine, but unfortunately, I wasn't available. It was like a 1 day. From what I remember, it was like a 1 day release. Let me just double check my phone, but I'm pretty sure it was like a 1 day release on like the Thursday, and I couldn't go because I was busy. So that wasn't possible to do. So for the most part, I've been doing that, going to the gym for a little bit. Oh, the gym's been a good update actually. I switched to another gym, so I'm finally going to this other gym near me, which is a branch called Pure Gym. And essentially, it's a 24-hour gym, and it's different from the one I was going to before. The one I was going to before was essentially like a leisure center. In the UK, that's equivalent to like a YMCA you have it there in the States. So it's really not the greatest kind of looking place, but it's cheap. I remember the place I used to go to before was like £24, like all included, right? In terms of classes and the gym access, like just insane. And also swimming, I think, included too, which usually gyms always add swimming on top and classes on top, right? It's an extra separate fee. So that was good. But obviously it's a bit hood. It's a little bit rinky dink. There's randoms in there. It's just not the bestest vibes, isn't it? Which shouldn't matter really. But once you start going to the gym a lot, you start to realize, there's little things that you can kind of prioritize. So this is why I understand people who pay £100, £200 to go to CrossFit gyms or to go places like Equinox, because it's got the little things extra, like the people that you like to see around there, good music, decent equipment, space and shit, all that good stuff. So now they opened a new gym called Pure, which is essentially like a better version of what I was going to beforehand. But the good thing about Pure Gym is that it's a little bit expensive in terms of the monthly rate. So I think if I was paying 24 at my old leisure center, this one's like 30 quid now. But of course, in the name, it's 24-hour access, which is fucking incredible. All you need is a fucking phone with the QR code. You scan yourself in and you're ready to go. And the equipment in there and how it's spaced out is pretty decent. And just based on the clientele, which you shouldn't really base a gyms on like that, but everybody in there, regardless of shape and size and weight, is really on it. You know what I mean? They've got their gym gear on. They're not on their phone all the time. They're not just posing around, wasting whatever. They're there to work out and do their bit and kind of go home. And this is kind of cool to see. And the classes are always packed and whatnot. So I'm enjoying that, to be honest. And I've only been there once anyway, so I'm not going to say, I've been there loads of times, but it definitely was incredibly good. So that was been awesome. But to be honest, I really, really did want to check out The Machine. I'm not going to lie, because I think there's been a lot of weird kind of conversation around it, and I feel like people aren't really able to be, I wouldn't say even critical. Was it? I'm not sure if it's a critical mindset type of thing, but I think there should be an ability, even if you don't like somebody and you find them annoying, to just say, hey, I can see the validity or the rationale behind this decision, and I can also envision this thing working out. You should be able to do that. So Bert Kreischer being a good example. He's not the most likable guy in the world. He can get a bit annoying. He's a little bit intense. He's somebody you can only deal with in small doses. I understand it. But if you just kind of take a zoom way looking out of it, kind of sort of thing, you can kind of understand why that Machine story would make for a good movie. Even if you don't believe the story to be true, whatever you think, just looking at it from an objective point of view, I can get why it would make for a good movie. And I can also get why in this current climate that we're in now, where all movies suck, especially the movies nowadays we get from Hollywood, they're all incredibly politically, drenched, loads of cultural war nonsense going on in there, loads of representation nonsense. Like, no one really wants to just tell a good story and put in a good movie. Who always ticks these kind of boxes that don't really make any sense. So if you do put together a decent enough movie that is a laugh, that gets people to kind of unplug from their regular struggles, they can go in watching without any judgment, without being lectured to, I can see why it would do well. If it's just straight up funny, it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's just like a good time. It's a good length. People are gonna want to flock to it. So I can see why it's successful. But I can also understand in this day and age where all Hollywood movies have to cost fucking over 50 million, I can also understand why it's not going to break even, because just the amount of money put into it and the people they've got in terms of the cast were pretty stellar, to be honest. For Bert's first movie, to get the people that he did for the first movie is pretty decent. So maybe they might be hemorrhaged in terms of just the production cost and the fees for the actors and stuff in terms of going break even. But I was hoping to go watch it because I really did think that it would be a decent movie to watch in the cinema, just as like a cinematic experience. Those kind of, comedic movies are kind of, you need to watch them in that sort of environment, I would imagine. But I don't know. I see a lot of people online not really willing to like give it a chance because they dislike they dislike Bert so much, which is really, really strange. But I get it. I understand where it's coming from. I know what you guys mean, but I think in general, if that was me, I would try my best to kind of make it work. And so far, I can't see anything that's showing that it's available to show actually in London. I'm just having a little scan through here to see if I can see anything on here. When I type in the Machine tickets, I always get like Florence and the Machine. So I guess the SEO isn't the greatest on that regard. Let me see if they've got anything on here. No, zero. Okay, cool. I guess there's nothing we can check out then. There's no really, nowhere showing it. I don't think so. Let me see if I can see. Let me see if I can type in London, see if anyone in London is showing it. Because I think it was like a limited day release sort of thing, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure it was one of those sort of things. So if you didn't watch it on the day that it was out and the various cinemas it was in, then you couldn't watch it. Yeah, so there's no listings at all in London. Zero. No listings in London whatsoever, which is a bummer. But hey, what can you do? Anyway, talking about movies and talking about stuff that I enjoyed, have you guys seen this? Sisu. I watched this over the weekend and I'm going to categorically say out here, hot take, Sisu is a better movie than John Wick 4, Chapter 4. Sisu, the movie that just came out, is a better movie than John Wick 4. I don't care what anyone says. In terms of action, it's the best. And the guy in it rarely speaks. If I'm not mistaken, it's based in Finland. So it's a Finnish movie with subtitles, of course. And essentially it talks about it's based on the Second World War, the end of the Second World War. So just as the Nazis are basically, they're basically accepting defeat and they're all basically gathering their resources, getting the last of the remaining, loot that they can get from neighboring towns and kind of going back home, quote unquote, to face the music. They kind of cross paths with a former general of the Finnish army who just lives in isolation by himself, right? And he essentially lives by himself in some random place where he's digging for gold. And he essentially is trying to find that gold in terms of the way to kind of get him back out from, depths of poverty and kind of try and rescue the owner of his family, blah, blah, blah. But he's there by himself. So this army crosses paths with him and it basically charts the entire story of them essentially taking the gold from him, obviously by beating him up, and him essentially enacting revenge and killing everybody, essentially. That's basically what it's about. And I swear to God, it is so fucking good. And from what I understand, it was filmed on a shoestring budget. I think, if I'm not mistaken, something like 10 million or something stupid like that. In terms of effects, in terms of the fighting was really good. Supposedly the lead actor is in his like 60s. You'd never guess it. He's incredibly, he's really good at fucking, acting in terms of, fighting and shit, combat. He barely says any words. If I'm not mistaken, the first words he actually says out of his mouth are right at the end of the movie. Everything is done in like grunts and groans and long pauses and really amazing shots and stuff. Like, honestly, the acting in this movie is so good, especially from the supporting cast, because the main lead guy doesn't act. He doesn't say anything. He just acts with violence and shit. But it is so fucking good. Really, really good. I really, really enjoyed it just because it didn't try and tell this like nonsensical story that had to include diversity and shit. There wasn't some random black dude just popped up with dreads who happened to be a soldier in the Third Reich or something. It was just a really fun time in terms of a movie, and I really fucking enjoyed it. Short length as well, if I'm not mistaken. It was like 90 minutes runtime or something like that. Really easy to watch. Didn't take itself too seriously, and in my opinion, a far better movie than John Wick Chapter 4, which I watched eventually. And again, maybe it's a laptop movie era that I'm in at the moment, where the majority of my movies I'm watching are on my laptops and whatnot. So it's not probably the best. I'm not the best judge for these type of things, but I do think, to be fair, that a lot of these movies, they don't pass a laptop test. Like, it took me a while to get through John Wick Chapter 4. It took me a strong while. It took me like a good couple of days. I broke it up in like 20-minute increments, and I kept getting bored, using my phone, opening different tabs and shit. And then I eventually finished it, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't as exhilarating, or it didn't keep me on the edge of my seat or hold my attention like the other chapters did. And I felt like, just in general, the stories kind of played out. It didn't really, spark my, interest in that regard. But Sisu definitely did. and I really recommend you check it out. The premise behind it was good, just how it's kind of played out, the fact that he doesn't talk that much, and the story is just told with these other people around supporting characters, kind of adding, adding kind of a color to the story and filling it out and stuff. And it's a perfect length, and it worked really, really, really well. And minimal CGI as well, from what I can tell. There's some special effects, of course, but minimal, and it does really, really well, to be fair. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. It's called Sisu. It's Finnish. I think Sisu, the whole term around it, is a Finnish word for like never giving up. It's kind of a Finnish word for kind of, being a dog and never accepting death and shit. And honestly, this guy is amazing. So if you haven't checked that out, then I do recommend you check out that movie, Sisu. Next, I want to talk about this. So the last couple of days, or no, yesterday or the day, it doesn't matter, recently, a few days ago, doesn't matter when exactly, but I went to this little shindig, this little powwow sort of thing that was kind of, what would you call it? Essentially like a live podcast panel discussion type of thing called the Monthly Digestif with Sydney Lima. Sorry. I'm not really too familiar who Sydney Lima is. I was kind of recommended to go to this thing. Big up my guy Gab, who I kind of obviously met through the podcast, which has been pretty sick, to be fair, meeting some of you guys IRL and seeing that you're all kind of normal and cool and chill people, which is nice, kind of restores my faith in humanity. So big up Gab. Recommended to go check this out, and we did, so not too bad in terms of that, kind of get out of my comfort zone and checking out things that I probably wouldn't have checked out if somebody didn't recommend it to me. But one thing it did do is it did remind me of just how, people say this a lot on like UK Black Twitter, that the UK is bad vibes, and this is a good reminder of it. Like, the UK definitely is bad vibes, but it's not just, it's not just specific to a particular race. It kind of covers all socioeconomic, racial kind of levels. So UK is just bad vibes overall, especially if you're somebody of any kind of noteworthy or celebrity or an influence, whatever, and that whole system or scene system just works really strange. So this event was like a panel discussion. Essentially what they do is that they have like a host of topics that they have. I think this one they were talking about AI. They're talking about OnlyFans. They were talking about what happened with Philip Schofield, the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp thing, and a few other things, right? And they have like these topics that they have, and then they have like, notable figures in culture who sit on the panel and kind of speak through it. And obviously it's hosted by this lady called Sydney Lima, who, if I'm not mistaken, is sort of like a vice journalist type of figure person. And then she got Jon Ronson, who most of you will know from his books. So You've Been Publicly Shamed, and The Men Who Stare at Goats and stuff. And he's been on Rogan a few times. Grace Campbell, I'm not really familiar with. She's a female comedian allegedly. And then this person, Raven Smith, who I'm a big fan of. I've read his book Men, and I've also been a fan of his writing in general, because I remember I stumbled across one of his kind of articles on Berghain, which kind of really spoke well and kind of put into words, some of the feelings that I have about the club and the scene and everything that it kind of means and whatnot. So fairly people that I'd be obviously interested in, right? I'm gonna be a fan of them. But one thing was for certain, having been there, is like panel discussion, was that it's just really hard to crack the scene. It really is difficult, and you really have to kind of accept that if you do want to crack the scene, if you do want to be a part of things, cool little subcultures, whatnot, you just have to be willing to kind of have your head down in the pillow and your ass up in the air. You just have to be willing to do that. Like, there's no other way to kind of get around it. There's always going to be that level of like, you feel like you're begging, you feel like you're coming across a little bit too try-hardy, you're coming across corny, you're sucking dick. It's just unavoidable not to feel that way, because the other people on the other side kind of always operate from a point of like superiority, like they're kind of staring down at you. You know what I mean? Like they're up there on the balcony as your pins are up there, on the ground floor, holding your hands out, looking for something to nibble on. So the show, the whole show itself was fairly decent. I think for a live podcast, now I understand why people don't like going to live podcasts and stuff, because it's sort of strange, because it feels like a conversation happening in a room that you want to take part in, but it's not really a conversation. It's just them talking on stage and you listening in a crowd. So you feel like you want to say something. Like if you're in like an after hours, or if you have like a party, a dinner party or whatnot, you're like all talking about stuff, innit? You're all kind of, jumping in and sharing your opinions and whatnot, making each other laugh. But in this occasion, you just have to sit there and listen to the people on stage say what they're saying. And sometimes it's nonsense, sometimes it's funny, whatever it is, but you just, so that kind of, there's a weird kind of thing to get used to your mind in terms of like realizing, okay, this is not, it's not an invitation to speak, just sit there and listen. So that's a bit strange to get used to. Then, of course, the topics weren't, the most topical ones of of the month or the week that you can kind of go through. I think the whole Amber Heard Johnny Depp thing is a bit strange. Whatever, it is what it is. To kind of speak about now, whatever, we kind of move on. But then one thing that was interesting was that at the end, we'd spoke at the topics. It kind of went through what it went through, and at the end, when they kind of wrapping up, there was no real option to kind of talk to the guest or the panelists. He kind of was like, "Yeah, we're done now. Go on your way," and they didn't really create any kind of like time to kind of hang out or network or whatnot, even though everybody in that room would have probably got along and probably share a lot of similar interest. The fact that we all made the effort to kind of go to this thing midweek, pay money. I think it was like 15 quid to go to the thing and whatnot. It kind of, it would mean that we all kind of would get along, but there was no real kind of, it wasn't created in a way where you could hang around. And as soon as the event opened, everyone kind of, ran away, scurried away like, like rats or something, or like cockroaches when you turn the light and shit. So that was a bit mad. And then when we finally did get a chance to speak to the panelists after the event, when we did finally get to speak to them after the event, bless my guy Gab, innit? Because, I felt a little bit bad because I felt like maybe at the time, even though I have a matter of fact way of speaking, and maybe sometimes it can come across like I'm being negative, which I don't mean to. I just know what the situation is, and I just know what I'm willing to do and what I'm not willing to do. When you were speaking about, linking and building and connecting and networking and stuff, I really didn't really give it any encouragement and whatever, because I know what these people are like. It's like, yeah, but, do what you want to do. So he goes up there and kind of tries to go and, have a good chat with the people that run the thing. And funnily enough, the person that looked like they were the chillest and the coolest to talk to was the camera dudes, but usually they're the ones, because those are the guys that actually are the important kind of, infrastructure of that whole scene, because they're documenting everything, recording it, making sure the audio is right, the video is right, and they probably do loads of other different events and whatnot. And it just generally, they don't really, not threatened by people, they just chill. So he seemed pretty cool, the camera dudes that we were speaking to, or that I was speaking to. And then when it came to the moment of like talking to Jon Ronson, Grace Campbell and Raven Smith, it was really interesting, because as soon as we started introducing ourselves and talking, you immediately got a little bit of a, oh, okay, nice, thanks. Hey, I'm a big fan of you. Love your books, love your articles and stuff. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, okay, cool story, bro, but get away from me. Like, they couldn't have made it any more clearer that they wanted nothing to do with us whatsoever, which again is interesting, but it's not surprising, because in general in the scene, that's what it's like. Unless you got a little bit of clout and people know you and whatnot, there's always going to be a bit of a top-down relationship, a little bit of a, I'm the star, I'm the person that you came to see, but we're not the same. You know what I mean? I'm over here, I've got the followers, I've got the money, I've got the success. You're there, you're the customer, you're the peasant, you're the one coming up, but we don't need to communicate outside of what you saw on stage, which is a little bit, sad and whatnot. But the funny thing was just the reading that I knew that what was true, because I knew straight away that the person that was definitely going to not like us was this lady called Grace Campbell, who I'm not really familiar with, but allegedly she's a comedian. And she was speaking, I think when the topic of like Amber Heard and Johnny Depp came up, she spoke really, really passionately about all men essentially thinking that because Johnny Depp got found innocent in a court of law and Amber Heard got found guilty of lying, that allegedly all men now think that all women are liars when it comes to sexual abuse or sexual assault, harassment or something, which is an insane statement to make. But, maybe in her life experience, every guy she's come across has used that verdict as an excuse to be misogynistic. Who knows? Maybe that's true. But when she came out of that statement, I was like, oh, she's definitely not going to like us. She's just not going to like the vibe, because I know sometimes without you even saying things, just the way you carry yourself, especially in the scene, whatever, people can just read what you're about. I don't know what it is, it just is what it is. I've spoken many times on here on my podcast already about my real desire and need and wanting to have gay friends, but for some reason, every time I try to communicate, break bread, network with gay guys, they don't vibe with me in the slightest. Maybe because they can feel my, ultra cisgendered male vibes, whatnot. They just don't want any parts of me. So I'm sure that Grace Campbell girl had the same sort of feeling. We came up, we shook their hands, or not shook their hands, but we said hi, hey Jon Ronson, hey Mark Raven Smith, fan of your work, and kind of say hey to her, and she was like, yeah, hi. Like you know what I mean, like distance. And then as we started talking, little powwow with Jon Ronson and Raven Smith, she made it very clear. I was like, I'm actually gonna go to my friends, I'm actually gonna go to people that I know and I want to hang out with. And she left, like she couldn't get away from us quicker. She did want nothing to do with us whatsoever. She looked at us as like, nah, these guys aren't, I don't want them to be my fans. I don't want to get to know them, nothing. So she was not having any part of it. Jon Ronson also wasn't the warmest guy ever, to be fair. I was actually more surprised, I'm not going to lie, considering his mannerisms and his voice and how kind of, you know, small he is and shit. I was legitimately surprised that he said he had a wife, because that's what he said on stage. Like, oh shit, I just assumed he was gay. I didn't know he wasn't, but that was what it is. But that's an aside. But he wasn't also the warmest. You know, a couple of words exchanged, and then he was like, yeah, I've got to go now, which was kind of funny. And then after we left, he was still standing there. But Raven Smith was really nice. He was really, really nice, Raven Smith. So again, you know, all it takes for me is like a little good slight interaction for 2 to 5 minutes, and then suddenly now I'm your fan for life. So when Raven Smith puts out a new book, which he confirmed on stage, he's got a new book in development or something that he's writing, I'm gonna jump on in there and kind of get that book and try and get it signed most probably. So he's made the fan for life of that thing. But I think in general, to kind of sum this whole thing up is like, this kind of reaffirmed my theory on the scene. And my theory on the scene isn't just like, you know, it isn't kind of negative. It's more so just based in reality. And the reality of it is, if you're willing to kind of put up with the awkwardness of trying to get to know these people and trying to break down that little barrier and basically spread your cheeks out for them and kind of really make it clear that you are, you know, a fan, and kind of put your pride and dignity to one side, you can make it. I swear to God, you can make it. Because all of my friends or people that I've known who stuck around longer than I did, because I kind of gave up pretty quickly after the time that I was working at Nike, and I realized the whole Nike thing didn't really get me anywhere, and people were still basically trying to stunt on me, even though I had a pretty decent job in the scene kind of thing. And I realized, you know what, it's probably better to spend more time just actually being really good at what you do and actually creating amazing products, creating amazing experiences, cultivating communities, all that good stuff, and resonating with people, than actually worrying about networking and shit. That's when I realized that it wasn't for me. But everybody that did stick around from that time of me being at Nike, so maybe like 2008 period or whatnot, to now, all those people have been very successful in the scene. So the whole like adage that I have of just not communicating with those people and removing myself completely isn't the right way to go about things. I don't think so. I think there's a middle ground in terms of doing the work and also being around there. But you also have to be willing to put up with that kind of conversation where you go and speak to like, you imagine you pay a ticket to go to see these people speak. You're engaging in the conversation. You're happy to be there. You're laughing at all their jokes and shit. And you just want to have a little bit of a powwow at the end of the thing. You're not asking them for their numbers. You don't want to go hang out with them. You're just shooting the shit. And they make it very, very clear that they don't want anything to do with you. Not even like on a courteous level. It's just like a purely, hey, I'm here to give the talk. You guys keep it moving. There is no powwow. There is no inspirational talk here. No inspirational message. No encouragement to keep doing your thing. Nothing. It's just, this is it. It's transactional. I'm the star. You're the present. It kind of makes you think, man, that's a bit of a bummer, but at least they're clear, you know? At least they're clear. So I think in general, if you're a scene kid and you're out here trying to do your thing, I think you're in a better position, I think so, to focus on actually being really good at what you do. Like, be amazing at what you do. Be undeniable at what you do. Cultivate your own little community. And what you should do then is then try and be extra, extra nice once you blow up. And someone else comes up who wants to kind of get some knowledge or get some info or motivation from you. Be extra nice and kind of correct the wrongs that you've kind of seen. I think that's the only way to kind of fix things in general. But if you're going in there thinking you can fix people already that are kind of in position and doing their thing, I think that's a bit of a waste of time, because they just are what they are. So it isn't really a judgment on these guys, because, you know, I've seen these people all my life really hanging out in the scene. I know what it's about, but it was a really interesting reminder of just what they're really like, because I think we came there with good vibes. We came there with a good energy, but they just weren't feeling us in the slightest. Like, in the slightest. I can't deny it. They weren't feeling us in the slightest. And, you know, it could have been helped with the organization of the event. I think these type of events where, you know, it was at the London Edition Hotel, really swanky hotel in central London near Tottenham Court Road. It could have been helped with some little adjustments. They could have maybe had a little 10-15 minutes bit in the beginning where they encouraged kind of networking, because there were some free drinks provided by some gin company. So they could have had those kind of, you know, around the table where all the gins are, the bar, where we can have time to talk and powwow. maybe change the seating plan to remove some seats on the side and make it a little bit concentrated in the middle so everyone can kind of pack in so we're close to each other. Maybe have a section in the beginning of the show where you get people to kind of shake the hand or introduce themselves to the person on the left and the right, just to kind of break the ice and shit. These are all corny things that you hear about then when you go to flipping work bonding trips or like church and stuff, but they do work in terms of getting everyone relaxed and chill. Little jokes and shit, maybe encourage people to ask questions at the end of this Q&A and rank people throughout the whole panel, and then maybe have a bit at the end and say, hey guys, we're going to end in a few minutes, but just be aware the panelists were going to stay behind. If you want a quick chat, grab a selfie or sign a book, then you can do that. But they didn't do any of that thing. It was just kind of, it was just kind of a show. We sat there, we heard them speak, and we kind of had to go away kind of thing, which is a bit, disconnecting. There was lack of community, whatever, vibes there. But again, just another reminder of just why I kind of stopped going to these sort of things, because, there's no worse feeling than going up to somebody who you rate and then making very, very clear that they don't want to speak to you. There's nothing worse than that. The worst thing actually was that Grace Campbell girl, because that comedian woman was like, she came into that panel like with a lot of baggage. Like she was, she come into that panel like on some I hate men shit, like, which I don't even know why that was a beef to begin with, and all of her answers were like, drenched in some level of that, and she just wasn't having a good time. She said she was a comedian, and I was thinking, rah, your comedy shows must be torture. And then when we finally did go and speak to her at the end, she probably felt that vibe from us and was like, yo, I'm out, I don't want anything to do with you guys, and kind of bounced straight away. So big up Grace Campbell. Hopefully you get it sorted wherever you need sorted. But moving on from that, it also made me think in general, that's probably why live podcast things don't work, innit? Because they're really odd events. Like I said, they're really strange places to go and sit down somewhere, which is strange really to think about it, because what's different between like talking and singing or like rap? It's not that weird really, but for some reason there's something very strange about sitting in a crowd and watching people having a conversation on stage, but you're not taking part in any way, shape or form. It's sort of like you're just sitting there. It's very interesting to see. I don't know. Maybe that's why I don't go to like TED Talks and stuff and whatnot. There's something odd about that whole exchange in general that I didn't really vibe with. And again, this is a small auditorium. It was like maybe 25 people, 30 people max in there. But what do I know? Anyway, moving on quickly. Want to speak about this. This is courtesy of ARTE Concert channel, and it features the Blessed Madonna back to back with High. And I wanted to quickly mention this because I've never seen this before in terms of a stage design and production, and I feel like a lot of these festivals out here will cost an arm and a leg. It's cost $1 million to fucking camp there and to get there, and flights and accommodation, but the actual production of the shows or the festivals aren't that interesting. It's the same shit, just a table, some speakers, and there you go, Bob's your uncle, right? Some of them don't even have fucking screens. I thought this was a really clever way to kind of get around not having screens, and just a clever way of maybe creating space, and a clever, interesting way to do the set design. So this is at a festival called Nuits Sonores, which is, I think is night summers or something, right? I don't know what that means in French, sonoros, but I know that's night in French. But it's a festival based in Lyon, and this was a back-to-back set that was happening between the Blessed Madonna and High, UK legend, London legend, stand up. And I thought this little mirrored effect that they had on stage was really, really clever in terms of creating an ability for the people in the festival to kind of see what the DJs were doing behind the decks, and also create like an interesting visual, people watching it after the fact. So I'm going to play a clip from the DJ back-to-back performance now. And as you can see from the beat, can you see that? So as you can see here, where Blessed Madonna and High are on the crowd, there's like a mirrored thing on top of them, hanging on top, right? And it's sort of like hung at an angle. So essentially you get to see the DJs playing. You get to see them from the top down as you're in the crowd. So it kind of creates like a interesting screen type of thing. So it's not a screen, so it's not maybe as expensive as actually getting a screen, and it probably isn't just a heavy piece of glass because the insurance now would be crazy. It's probably just it's probably plastic, right? a very reflective type of plastic that they've kind of stressed out, I would assume. And you get the ability to kind of see at least two angles of the stage, which I feel like creates like a better experience if you're at a festival, especially if you're like far behind and you can't see them performing or whatnot. I quite like that. I think this would actually even work in nightclubs if they wanted to, but in the festival, especially during the day, this is fucking perfect. Let's play a little bit more of the clip. And they've actually got, if you see behind it, they've actually got another screen behind them. Actually, there's actually another screen too, another kind of I'm pretty sure it's a plastic material. It's some sort of a plastic film or something along those kind of lines that they've kind of stretched out around the back. So you kind of have it around the back of the stage as well to create a kind of illusion of space, and you also have it hanging above the DJ. I think it's just a pretty cool idea. Yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there. But yeah, before it gets crazy, High was on a mad one. Big up High also. This is another reminder, and kind of reminded me why some DJs don't like doing back-to-backs. As much as I like Bless Madonna, I think she's a decent DJ. High was on another level. High really showed her up. Like, she was on another level. The worst thing about back-to-backs is that you can tell when somebody's doing really badly, because you can tell when the other better person comes on all the time. Even if you're not watching the video, you can always see, oh yeah, that's the other person, because their track selection is just on point. Like, especially if they're playing just two tracks, you're like, oh, your selection just keeps getting better and better, and it's two tracks only, but you're just smashing the two tracks again and again and again. So I really recommend you check it out. It was a live stream. They had to take it down for a bit. I don't know, I'm not sure why, and they had to re-upload it, but still, I watched it live when it came out, and it was fucking fire. So definitely check it out. And I think this festival, Nuits Sonores, is definitely one to kind of add to the list, especially with it being in Lyon in France, which I've never been to. And I think in general, festivals are a really good excuse to kind of go traveling to far-flung places that you probably wouldn't visit if the festival wasn't on there. And this is a really good option to do so. And I think these videos, these live streams that they do, are a really good opportunity to kind of get more people to kind of visit these festivals and check them out, and obviously to help the DJs and whatnot. But I think ultimately the festivals benefit the most, because people look at it and think, oh, rah, this is my kind of vibe. The crowd as well, from what I could see, looked very, the range in terms of ages was interesting. The last thing you want is to be at a festival where everyone's sort of the same age, whether they're old or young. A nice kind of range across the board kind of helps. Everyone kind of looks chill. Even though it's packed, it still looks like there's space around and stuff. Everyone's got shirts on, so it's not super cold or super hot. So all that stuff kind of adds to it. And just a little added benefit of like what they did with the stage design, just kind of adding some little bit that probably didn't cost them too much, but maybe logistic wise took a bit of work, but just little thing just to kind of increase the fucking production and value factor for the audience. I'm all for it. So big up this festival, big up Bless Madonna, and back to back with High. Recommend you check it out if you haven't already. Really interesting, and for me, really cool set. I'll probably link it in the description too if you want to check it out, but it's on there courtesy of ARTE Concert, ARTE Concert, ARTE with the E on the end, concert on YouTube. You can find it on there. Bless Madonna back to back with High. Moving on from that, what you guys saying in the chat quickly? Let's see what you're saying here. People are saying we just had Movement Festival in Detroit. Yep, I've heard about that one. Koila, big up you, my guy. Sounds like a deal to me. Mr. Harvey says, meanwhile, people worried about the mesh users getting dirty, like grow up. True. Pack of sardines. People say, I don't know whether to jam to the track or run. People suck the yeah. Run or jam. That's my constant kind of decision making process when I go to festivals now at the moment. Anyway, what am I doing? Running or jamming? Next up, we have to talk about this. We have to talk about this. So, have you guys seen this? Finally, Camp FLOG GNAW. festival has been confirmed, and it actually got confirmed in epic fashion. Actually, it got confirmed courtesy of Kendrick Lamar and Baby Keem's new track. I forgot the name of it. I think it's called Hillbillies or something. Tyler the Creator makes a cameo, and he's standing outside Dodger Stadium with his 2 cars. I think he's Nova. I think it's called one of them Nova cars. I've got this. It's like a rally car, and also an old Rolls Royce, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And he's out there on the front flexing with Kendrick Lamar and Baby Keem, and he reveals a pin on his jacket that says Camp FLOG GNAW Carnival 2023. And a lot of fans, myself included, have been wondering when has that festival, when is it going to be confirmed? And it finally got confirmed. We got a date, and also we got a website splash page for interest, and it says here, Tyler the Creator presents Camp FLOG GNAW Carnival November 11th to the 12th 2023 at Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles. And it's going to be fucking amazing. And I honestly have to say, in terms of artist-led festivals, this legitimately is the best one. And I went to this many years ago. I forgot the last time I went to LA. It might have been 2015. It might have been, way before that. But whenever I did go, that was the first time that I'd been to Camp FLOG GNAW, but I've been to a couple of other kind of artist-led festivals in general, and I think this was definitely up there as the best, because it wasn't mostly focused on Tyler, and just in terms of his taste, he booked some really interesting people. Everyone that was there was also really cool. It was just cool to kind of go to, again, kind of similar to when I went to kind of Afro Punk. Is it Afro Punk? Is that what the festival's called? I think it's called Afro Punk. It was just interesting to go to these type of things that you would normally go to and be one of only 5 black people, to suddenly go to these events and see a ton of cool, black kids there just hanging out, enjoying themselves and shit, and connecting and kind of vibing with them. That was also chill to see. And just loads of people who are really, really into the music. Because that's the one thing you do get with Tyler the Creator fans. There is a section of Tyler the Creator fans who are super weird and a little bit too involved in his life and whatnot, and a bit obsessive. But there is also another side of Tyler the Creator fans who are incredibly into their music, love playing instruments, produce themselves, are very creative in their own way, shape, or forms, and it kind of really does resonate with the audience that you see out there. So for me, in my opinion, I think in terms of value for money, it definitely is one of the better festivals out there. The only shame is that I feel like the heads up's a bit late for a festival in November. I feel like promoting it now, just beginning of June, feels a bit late. I would have liked them to confirm dates sooner, so I could have had the ability to kind of buy tickets to kind of go, because flights out to LA, even this far ahead in London, are just crazy. But I would have had a better chance to probably attend if I knew the dates maybe in January or February. But it kind of is what it is. But then the interesting thing, I think, is the passes, the VIP passes and stuff, and the packages and what you get with it. Because I think this is probably one of the best ways to kind of sell a festival, in my opinion, personally. Because I feel like you get some real value for money. And again, maybe because I'm just a fanboy for Tyler anyway, but I think this is pretty cool. So you've got some packages here, right? You got a 2-day general admission pass, which is for $335. And again, think about this, right? This is what I'm saying, that whole what's it called? Skankfest and shit. I could never justify buying a ticket to go to Skankfest, because look at these music festivals. I'm going to see some of the most important and most, amazing artists in music out, young or old, surrounded by really cool and interesting people from all over the world who are also fans of the music and shit, and there for the right reasons, for 2 days in sunny LA for $335. But then you've got Skankfest tickets going for like 400 plus and shit, to see some sweaty comedians in a fucking tent. Are you having a laugh? No way. So anyway, the regular 2-day general admission pass is £335, $335, sorry, plus fees. But then the most interesting part is this: you've got 2-day VIP admission pass for $595, and the merch package for the VIP pass, right? So this is the first level. Look at what you get in the package when you buy this VIP pass. You get a backpack, a new golf backpack that hasn't come out yet, I don't think. You get a golf snapback. You get I think that's a snow globe. You get a flask. You get a carabiner. You get another little baseball bat handle thing you can put on the side, and you get some notebooks. You get a notepad, like a Camp FLOG GNAW notepad, and another thing you can kind of draw in and shit, which is pretty cool, I think, for the VIP pack. Because I think separately these items are quite pricey. I'm sure the bag itself is already $100, so I think this is pretty cool, value for money, right? And then if you scroll down and you go to the 2-day super VIP package, you get this one in the VIP merch package. Look what you get here. You get a bike, right? So you get a 29 or 26-inch BMX, which is the bikes that Tyler loves to ride around. You get a Camp FLOG GNAW, you know, kind of festival picnic towel thing. You get a bum bag. You get a mug. You get also some notepads, and also you get an up-and-coming pair of Converse and golf sneakers that are soon to come. So imagine that for how much is it? $1,495. You get all of that. You get the bicycle, which is probably going to be about $900 itself. The shoes, about $100. The rug, maybe about 200, 300 depending, and some bum bag and whatnot, and the cup. And I think all this stuff is stuff that you would I would use on a daily anyway. It's stuff that you would actually use. It's stuff that would actually be helpful. You know, you got the bike that you can kind of go out straight away and go exploring, take some cool pictures, go out and start drawing and shit and exploring your town and not sitting at home. You got some cool shoes you can wear, a bum bag, a mug. Like, all this stuff is fucking awesome. And I haven't seen this type of stuff from merch packages. I think for the most part, the stuff that you do see for festivals is like drinks and shit, or maybe drinks, apparel or whatnot. You don't ever see like stuff that you can actually use real world. So I think both packages are pretty cool. Obviously the one with the bike is absolutely amazing to check out, but I love it. And also you have these add-ons as well. You can get 2-day unlimited carnival games as well, because that's the kind of whole vibe that they're going with it. But I quite like this, man. Honestly, I quite like this. Oh yeah, so Natashki's saying, how are you going to get the bike on the plane though? Yeah, good question. Good question, Natashki. I think what you would do is maybe they can get it shipped out to you. I don't think you're going to get it there on the day. I think it's something they're going to send to you after the fact, I'd imagine, because I think that even the shoes aren't out yet, because the shoes are blacked out. So I'm assuming you're going to probably get those stuff sent to you later. So you buy it, and I'm assuming, depending if they can ship the stuff overseas, they'll ship it out to you, most likely, I would imagine. So VSF, so VIP, okay, I can't get it. So it says here, VIP admission is only available for US domestic orders, unfortunately. So I can't get that. So the only one that's international is the one with the backpack, this one here. But the bike one, you can't get it international unless I was to do it and order it via proxy and get someone to receive the delivery and then send it back out to me, which is fucking long. But still, I just like the whole premise around it and the whole package he's doing. So big up Tyler the Creator, big up that festival. Can't wait to see more things from them going forward. Moving on from that, quickly want to mention this because I feel like this is good to highlight, because I have spoken about this a few times on here about these whole instances and what should happen. And this is courtesy of Huffington Post. And it says, actor Danny Materson found guilty of raping 2 women. So for once, in these kind of, occasions where a very prominent celebrity guy or whatnot gets involved in some sort of issue involving rape or sexual assault, sexual harassment, and they get, they get charged with it, or maybe someone goes to the police with it. Now we've actually got some, a matter where it actually did result in the person actually getting charged, like for real, and being found guilty, which is something that doesn't happen a lot. For whatever reason, the conviction rate when it comes to rape especially is disastrously low, especially in Europe. I'd imagine it may be even in parts of North America. So this is a pretty decent outcome, all things considered. And also I feel like it's a cautionary tale and a warning to some of these comedians out here who are crying and complaining about, some little court of public opinion cancelling, that things could be far worse. You could be found actually guilty of the stuff you've been accused of, or people can spread some not so nice stories about you being a douche in terms of dates and stuff, and maybe ruin your reputation. But it could be far worse, because this guy is like, legitimately a rapist in this regard. So it says here, a jury has found that 70s show actor Danny Materson guilty of raping 2 women at his Hollywood Hills home in the early 2000s. The jury was not able to come to a verdict on an additional account of rape involving a 3rd woman. This was the 2nd trial for the 47-year-old actor and Scientologist. Prosecutors said Scientology officials protected Materson for years after he drugged and sexually assaulted women. The women, who also were Scientologists, testified that the church barred them from making reports to the police. Scientology in the fucking mud once again, innit? Fucking hell. All these religions, organized religions regardless, whether they are new ones, whether they're the conventional religions, they all seem to have an issue with reporting and supporting people who are reporting crimes that involve sexual misconduct and just, protecting victims in the first place. They always seem to be willing to protect the person doing the raping or the pedoing as opposed to the victim, which is always bizarre to me, because you'd imagine churches or religions, you know, I don't know, all these places, you'd imagine they're kind of like they're like a sanctuary, a safety, right? Is it sanctuary? Yeah, well, a sanctuary from like the horrors of the outside world. But if anything, they're even worse than the outside world. It continues. Jurors deliberated for 8 days before returning their verdict. The original trial ended on November the 30th, 2022, with the jury deadlocked in all counts. After extended deliberation, which had to be restarted when 2 jurors got COVID. Materson pleaded not guilty to the charges and didn't testify in his own defense in either of the trials, of course. Look at the face. That's definitely a face of a guy that wouldn't, defend themselves because they know he's guilty. The second jury, comprising 7 women and 5 men, was the first to hear allegations that Materson had drugged his victims, which Judge Charlene Omeldo had not allowed in the original trial. The jury only heard that the women had been incapacitated when Materson allegedly raped them in separate instances at his home in 2001 and 2003. The defendant drugged his victims to gain control. He does this to take away the victim's ability to consent. Deputy District Attorney Ariel Anson told the jury in a closing argument on May 16th. Do you want to have sex? You don't have a choice, Anson said. The defendant makes that choice for these victims, and he does it over and over again. The first victim testified and said that Materson smothered her with a pillow and threatened her with a gun during an attack in 2003. Fucking hell. While she was semi-conscious after drinking from a glass of alcohol he had served her. Materson claimed that he had consensual sex with the women. His defense attorney, Philip Cohen, sought to discredit the women in closing arguments, pointing out inconsistencies in their stories and suggesting that the prosecution focused on Scientology to disarm from other problems in the case. The judge ruled that the more evidence related to Scientology could be heard in the second trial, allowing former Scientologist official Claire Headley to testify as an expert witness to the pushback on the church denials about his policies and principles, which the critics have described as controlling and abusive. The women who are no longer Scientologists testified that the church barred them from reporting the assaults to the police, blamed them for alleged rapes, and harassed, intimidated, and stalked them. Headley, who sued the church in 2009 after years of rising through the years ranks as a Sea Org religious leader, testified that his policy that you do not call the police without specific authorization, and by the laws of Scientology it would be a high crime to report fellow Scientologists to the police without permission. Church of Scientology spokesperson Karen Powell flatly denied that such policies exist in the church. The church has no policy of prohibiting or discouraging members from reporting criminal conduct on anyone, Scientologists or not, to law enforcement. Powell said that the statement to Huffington Post. She also called the stalking and harassment allegations an attempt to money grab by the alleged victims, who also are suing Materson and the church in a civil suit. Fucking hell, mate. And again, for me, this is a cautionary tale for most people out there. Like, if you get away with it, you get away with it. Just keep your head down. But this whole complaining you see these guys do, especially some of these comedians, the Brian Cannons, the Chris D'Elia's, about cancel culture, like, you haven't been cancelled. Your fans basically don't care, but Hollywood isn't interested in hiring you because you're bad for business. That should be enough for you to be happy, because, you know, that's smart on your name. Having the R word charged next to your name, or being a pedo, it's just a hard one to shake. So the fact that you've got that as a career to fall back on in terms of podcasting or creating content should be good enough for you, because there's guys like this who's like a conventional entertainment industry person, part of the whole entertainment industry thing machine. Once you get cancelled in this way, or once you get found guilty of a crime, guilty of actual rape, guilty of it in a court of law, it's basically impossible to come back. You have no basis to come back because you haven't really built an audience. So the fans that you needed to kind of care about you and, you know, and just support you in your downturn aren't there, because they only support you through your movies. They don't really know you as a person. And basically you're done. So essentially your life is completely over from now on. The life that you used to lead beforehand of kind of playing make-believe in front of cameras is done forever and ever, which maybe some people would say is just deserves for the crime he's committed. But I just think in general, like I said, I just think some of those guys need to just count their blessings, that for whatever reasons, whatever charges they have, especially with the Chris D'Elia's and the Brian Cannons of this world, those sort of allegations they have against them are just allegations so far. There's just a lot of he said, she said. It really seems like so far they're hard things to kind of prosecute in a court of law. That should be a good thing. that means you can kind of quote unquote get away with it, fix up your attitude, fix up how you move, and essentially try to be happy with what you got. But for some reason, these guys want the world. They want to be able to just do and say what they want with no repercussions. They want to be able to kind of still exist in the industry with no requirements and how they behave and shit. It's just a very, very strange way to kind of live your life. But in general, this guy sounds like he deserved it. It sounds like he's absolutely guilty of what he did. So bury him under the jail. I have no, qualms to kind of, essentially write people off that do any kind of raping, any kind of pedo behavior. You can get completely written off in my book. And in general, that definitely is one of them ones where you think, to yourself, hey, being an actor or something is basically some form of a privilege, and if you do take the piss out of that privilege by abusing people, by raping people, then you probably don't deserve to have such a gift and such a privileged position given to you or whatnot. And maybe in that instance it should be taken away from you, who knows. But regardless, the guy got found guilty, so RIP to his career. We continue that one and we say what do we say here? We'll say, oh, Natasha, you're saying, yeah, no one thinks you didn't do it, so count your lucky stars and keep your head down. Exactly, Natasha. Like, for the most part, there are some rare occasions where we think the person didn't do it. I'm sure there are. On some occasions, we hear some of these guys, we probably can all assume what we know, what the deal is. But I think for the most part, we all know, when you hear some sort of names, I think your gut instinct tells you certain things like, this is probably believable, this probably isn't believable. So if you do get away with it on a technicality, you owe it to yourself and to your family to just keep your head down. You really do. When you don't keep your head down, in my opinion, that's kind of a little bit of a sign that you're a little bit of a sociopath. There's some narcissism involved there. Like, it's a strange thing in that regard, personally for me, when they don't keep their head down. There could be a side of it where you're trying to fight the allegations, which they don't really. I don't think either party, when it comes to Brian Campbell and Chris Lee, has really offered any kind of compelling counter argument to the numerous allegations against them. Like, there isn't, there's nothing there really. It's just, nah, I didn't do it. Everything was consensual. They made it up. It's like, really? You can't offer any compelling evidence. Like, even though the accusers are offering corroborating stories of people that they spoke to about it beforehand, before you were clouded up when they mentioned it. I don't know. That whole thing for me doesn't make sense, because if that was me and I'm accused of something like that, best believe I'm fighting until the death to clear my name. That's something that's never going to stop, especially if I'm innocent, especially if I know I didn't do it. I'm fighting to the end, It's never going to stop. But I guess some of these guys would rather just, pretend they didn't do it, carry on, and also complain. It's maybe a weird way to kind of show that you're, I don't know. Anyway, moving on. I thought this video was really interesting to play because I thought this was an indication on maybe the price of fame, the actual real price of fame, and what people are actually willing to do for it. Because I feel like there was a weird kind of press around Kim Kardashian when she went on, I think she was doing like an interview for Time magazine, and she let slip during the interview that, oh, no, I think one of the questions from the crowd actually was, did you ever see like an end, like a retirement plan from being Kim Kardashian? And essentially she basically tried to lie and say, yeah, I'm not going to do this forever. I've got other things I want to do, blah, 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 which to me, I think is a lie, and it's unnecessary lie, because I think, any person with a brain can look at Kim Kardashian one time and know that this person was born to be in front of the cameras, right? Was born to be whatever she is, an influencer, a mogul, a media person. Like, this is what her life has always been about. There's video footage of this girl when she's like a fucking child, do you know what I mean, performing in front of camera and wanting to be famous and shit, and that's always been her kind of number one goal, and she achieved it, right? She completed every single level of being famous. She kind of went to the top of the mountain, and I just don't think someone like that gives it up. She kind of loves the intention, clearly loves whatever comes of it, good and the bad. So I don't think there's anything wrong in just saying that, no, this is what I love to do, and I'm going to die, quote unquote, on stage. But I think in this type of era we live in at the moment, you kind of, maybe people don't really, it's not the chicest thing to do, to kind of embrace the fact that you're a fame whore. Like, people don't like that. Or to kind of be unapologetically you. You kind of have to always pretend that you've got more to you. There's more layers. Sometimes just what you have should be good enough. And if it's just you know, blatant materialism, if it's whatever else you got going on, like that should be good enough. You shouldn't need to kind of invent this whole other thing going on so you can kind of give yourself more layers, like the whole lawyer thing and shit. It's just weird. But anyway, that was something. So on top of that, she also did some press for the up and coming new season, I think for the Keeping Up with the Kardashian show. And part of the up and coming season promo was this really interesting clip where she speaks about her relationship with Kanye West, or lack thereof, and the damage he did in terms of spreading the rumors about her hooking up with Drake. And I feel like this is a really good clip, interesting clip to play, because it is a really good illustration as to the actual real life cost of fame. Because after all these years, after all of Kim Kardashian's successes in business, in media, with her family life, whatever it may be, this whole sex tape with Ray J thing is still something that looms over her head. And it's something that she could never shake for whatever reason. She keeps getting reminded about it. It's obviously something that clearly still annoys her, even though it's something that her and her mum clearly did on purpose to try and propel her career, which is not a bad thing, because I still remember at that time that she was coming up. People forget this, but the whole sex tape, personal sex tape thing was a thing back then to kind of boost your career and whatnot. Just for them, it just went super, super viral. But it was something that everyone kind of done, and it sort of was a deal with the devil that they kind of did at the time, wanting to be successful more than anything, and it obviously worked. But for some reason nowadays it's seen as a really big slight, and it's something to kind of mark to put on her sheet that she's got this thing out there, and it's something that she could for never can shake, no matter what the fucking success she has in life, which is kind of sad, I feel like, because I feel like she's done enough nowadays to sort of like remove that sort of like smudge or whatever you may be from her name in general. But let's play the clip anyway. This is Kim Kardashian talking about Kanye and the damage of him spreading the rumors about her hooking up with Drake.
All of the craziness, everything that Kanye says about us, like, I never comment. I never post. Like, he has made up the most insane narrative about you and the tape, and we stay silent. We stay silent.
But the funny thing about staying silent, I don't really get. If the staying silent thing doesn't help them, because I feel like the staying silent thing, they kind of played into it a little bit. It was kind of beneficial to Kris Jenner's image to be portrayed as this like cougar woman who may or may not hooked up with Drake. It was beneficial at the time for them to play up to the idea that Drake may have fucked Kim behind Kanye's back, especially when she was going through a period of not liking Kim, because Drake is like Kanye's mortal enemy for some reason. Like, they kind of played into it a little bit, I feel like. But then when it clearly, underneath it all, playing into it or not, it's something that clearly does annoy her. It gets under her skin completely. But I feel like they should have cleared it up. If it really wasn't true and it was actually creating some real life damage, they should have cleared it up, but they didn't, because it was benefiting them in terms of their bottom line. That's the brutal honest of it.
Through all the lies, all the stuff.
But you can't control somebody else. You know, he's doing this to himself.
But even just like how he looks so down on me for like my tape, and brings it up all over town, all over the media. Like,
so this is definitely a thing that Kanye was doing. But that's the thing as well about Kanye that I could never really excuse, to be fair as well. That kind of made me look at him a bit of a weird way. Most of us in the public knew this was always going to be doomed, right? From how Kanye acts and speaks and how the Kardashians kind of go about their lives, not to judge either party, but we just knew that this marriage or this kind of matrimony or this family was doomed. It was never going to last. Cool. But I've always kind of looked at Kanye a little bit of a side eye, thinking, bro, you actively went after this lady, knowing her past, knowing her history, knowing everything that she's done beforehand. You actively spoke glowingly and well of her. You actively kind of looked the other way when it came to the tape, and then suddenly when it benefited you and when you didn't like her anymore, suddenly the tape became an issue. So that's the thing that I've always kind of felt a little bit distasteful about Kanye in that regard. Like, you married her knowing what she's about, and then suddenly when you married her, you want to start, I don't know what he's wanting to do, covering, especially when he went through his whole like conversion to flipping Christianity. He went to like covering up and stuff, and didn't want her to do certain magazines with malarkey. It's like, bro, you know what you married into, like, let her live. You shouldn't be like too controlling, but hey, what do I know?
thanks for reminding people once again. All of his shenanigans, I don't even know what the to call it.
Rhetoric.
is going to be far more damaging to the kids one day than my tape will ever be.
That's right.
I don't believe that, to be fair. I don't think she believes that. I don't think in general, unfortunately, I think, because I'm interested to see actually what happens, because we haven't actually had it just yet, have we? We haven't actually had the generation of girls who are involved in sex work on OnlyFans and who then eventually go on to have families. I think we have it already with like Adam 22's wife, Adam Leonard the Plug. They have a kid together. They recently got married, so they kind of, you know, are maybe the first generation of that I can think of. But I can't think of many OnlyFans people who are young and have kind of got married and had kids. We just see how that kind of plays out, because you would imagine any kid who has a mum online, I think more so women than men, unfortunately, who has an explicit sex tape about them, is definitely going to be a point of contention. We already see the damage it done to their family when, I think it was Saint, right? One of the kids from their family was playing Roblox, and somebody in there, I guess, must have seen that it was Saint and kind of posted the video on the Roblox thing. Because I think Roblox is like, I don't know, maybe you can post videos and shit. Somebody did something that had a link to the sex tape. So it's already causing an issue now where they're young and not really knowing what's going on. So you can imagine how, as it progresses, as it gets older, it's probably going to be a problem. Because a lot of kids, you know, as many kids are going to be supporting their parents, there's also going to be kids who are going to grow up and just be like completely different from their parents in every way, shape or form. So I feel like them seeing a sex tape of their mum online is definitely far more damaging than their dad, you know, having some dilly dances with anti-Semitism and being a fan of Hitler and shit. I really reckon the tape is going to be more damaged. And you already can see it from how they're responding. They're responding in a way where the tape is definitely more harmful. It's caused them more harm than what Kanye said. They're not sitting down here talking about the damaged it caused them as a family to have Kanye run around town acting like a, you know, a flipping Holocaust denier. They're speaking more about the damage of him spreading the rumor that she fucked Drake. So clearly this is an issue. And this is somebody that kind of embraces their sexuality, is free to be naked and embrace them, blah, blah, blah. But still, when people talk out of turn about these sort of things, it clearly gets under her skin.
Right.
And I have to sit here and not say anything ever, because I know one day my kids will appreciate that. And the one that was supposed to protect me and still does interviews saying they will be my forever protector is the one that is hurting me the most. He was the one that started a rumor that said I was hooking up with Drake, having an affair, our whole marriage. She accused me of that publicly.
I'm not too sure if that's true, to be fair, in the narrative of things. I'm not sure if that's true. I think a lot of fans were trying to figure out what Kanye's actual problem with Drake was, because it just seemed weird. Because at one point it seemed like Drake was really infatuated with Kanye. He looked up to him. He was being really kind of like, you know, glowing in praise of him, giving these flowers at every occasion. But it seemed like Kanye had a real issue with the fact that Drake was the number one guy, right? The guy that all the girls liked, the guy that all the guys wanted to be like and shit. He just had a real issue with that. And the fact that he was being played everywhere. And he maybe felt that some of the bars that Drake was spitting had subliminals against him and shit. And then I guess the real story around it is that it was something involving a track that Drake wanted Kanye to get on. He didn't get on it. He then puts it out as that poopity scoop thing. And then the whole issue with Pusha T starts, where Pusha T finds out about Drake's secret kid, and Drake makes the correlation that he just told Kanye about his secret kid recently, and he felt that, you know, Kanye was going back behind his back and feeding Pusha T info about him. So that was it. But I think fans were trying to figure out what was going on. And one of the hypotheses or theories out there was that, oh, Drake must have fucked Kim. That's the only thing that would have sent Kanye into a tizzy if he found out the person that he hated as a rapper also had fucked his baby mother's or wife behind his back. That would really kind of get under his skin. And I think Drake obviously played into it. He didn't deny it because he knew how much anguish it was causing Kanye, but I don't think it was a rumor that he was starting. And if anything, he was also trying to, I feel like, get clarification and find out if it was true behind the scenes, because I think Drake told him flat out it wasn't. From what we heard from Ye, I think on Drink Champs, he basically said, yeah, he asked Drake and he said, no, I didn't. But I don't think he believed him. So he was probably, you know, floating it around town and saying, you know, asking questions at dinner parties and whatnot, because he really wanted clarification because he didn't believe the woman and stuff. So, but again, I don't think it's fair to say Kanye started it. But, you know, again, you can see this gets under her skin. Like, it definitely is a thing.
So the person that's supposed to protect me the most publicly would accuse me of having an affair throughout our whole marriage. I really can't wrap my head around how he thinks he is a protector. You know, it's sometimes.
And that's the things I agree with her in that one. I think, you know, if this is actually causing your wife at the time anguish and pain, you should go out your way to kind of try and, you know, quell all that stuff and be protecting as you can in that way. But maybe his way of protecting Kanye at the time was what he said was his protecting way, where I think he organized with Whack 100 to get the last bits of footage of the tape off from him and shit, so no one could put it out, and he spoke to Ray J. So maybe in his own way, Kanye feels like he was protecting her by not allowing more BTS extra footage to kind of come out from that sex tape from back in the day with Ray J. But at the time, you know, it is what it is. They were going through a pretty disastrous breakup. But again, this is the price of fame. I feel like people don't really speak about often, because Kim is like the most famous person in the world, maybe the most famous person in the world. But she had to make a deal with the devil when she first started out to kind of get that little pop to kind of really go viral. And she basically rid that wave for, you know, 2+ decades, and has become incredibly successful, rich and famous because of it. But it's still an odd cloud that hangs over her head, and I'm really interested as to why that's the case, because I feel like nowadays sex work and sex tapes and all this sort of stuff is not as much of a faux pas as it was yesteryears. Like, I don't think people really give a shit anymore if a guy's fucking dick pic leaks or a woman's nude leaks. But, you know, back in the day when the fappening happened and people were hacking into celebrity people's iClouds and leaking their nudes and shit, that was a big deal. It still is a big deal, don't get me wrong, but it was a real career shaming ender type of thing. But I don't think it is anymore. So it's really interesting to see that despite all the changes in culture, all the changes that we're having as a society and what we kind of deem to be acceptable or not acceptable, there's still this shame attached to that sex tape that she had with somebody that she's in a relationship. Again, this isn't a sex tape with some random guy in a porn studio. She was dating Ray J at the time. This is a sex tape between two people who are in a relationship. It shouldn't be that big of an issue, but it clearly is a big issue for her, and she can't shake it off. And it probably doesn't help that Kanye, the father of her children and her ex-husband, is definitely somebody who's perpetuating this thing and pushing it out there in the long run. But I think she's delusional. She thinks that Kanye's love of Hitler is way more harmful for the kids than her sex tape, because clearly the sex tape is an issue, because there's a whole generation of kids out there also who are anti OnlyFans girls and don't think they're worthy of having, you know, having kids or having a stable relationship. They think they're bottom of the barrel women, all this sort of weird narrative that exists out there, right? There's the kind of fresh and fit way of kind of looking at women. If that's the case, then that is kind of the case, isn't it? You kind of have to kind of play your cards as you're dealt with them, kind of. You have to kind of hope in that regard. Anyway, moving on with that one. I'm going to play this clip as well, courtesy of, I'm not sure what podcast this is. I think it's a guy called Big Fats, and Boosie's on there speaking. And he's speaking on there a little bit about Gunna and the fact that he's now out. And I'm curious to know, like, what's the infatuation, especially in America, or especially just in black culture overall, with being obsessed with the whole like snitching thing? Because I understand it from Boosie's side of things. I think Boosie has a history of somebody in his camp. I think one of his shooters got arrested, and basically he got implicated in some stuff because his shooter snitched on some certain things. So I can understand if you were directly involved in things and you were living a street life and you were in a gang and you had somebody snitch on you and potentially take you away from your children and ruin your life and stuff, even though they agreed to that lifestyle too, but suddenly they had a change of heart. I can understand why it would affect you. But to a regular schmegular civilian who's never lived that lifestyle, why would it bother you that Gunna snitched or didn't snitch? It shouldn't really bother you in the slightest, really, in my opinion. But let's play the clip anyway. This is Boosie talking about the whole topic on this podcast. You wanna play?
Thing that came out this week. He said, basically said Gunna a rat. Do you think you can have that type of label in this industry and have a successful career?
I think Gunna might be done unless he go to probably another country.
Damn.
Yeah, because Weezy say fuck it.
He did.
Weezy really out of here.
Weezy say he out of here.
Weezy out of here.
When he say that? that?
Yeah, like
Weezy said like a
2
couple
days
days
ago.
ago. I saw this shit. Weezy said you out of here. Everybody's saying, hey, you might need to go to. I mean,
He said he working on something.
I don't
though.
want no rat to excel. So I hope he never sell a record again.
I know it. I know.
Yeah.
I really hope he never sells another record again. I don't. I just.
What if?
I've been hurt.
Yeah.
What if? Yeah. What if?
So, I hope he never sells another record again. Again, when it comes from Boosie, I get it because he's directly been involved in situations where a snitch and somebody that was a part of the lifestyle, part of that culture, a part of that way of life, decided to then rat on everybody to spare themselves time. I think there is a lack of honor involved in that. Fair enough, if you're involved in the lifestyle. But if you're just a consumer of the music, why would you care if Gunna snitched or not? It's a very bizarre thing. And I feel like in some regards on podcasts, it feels like a weird way for men especially to kind of feel like they're bad, to feel like they're bad boys when you speak about this type of stuff. Because I enjoy watching documentaries on YouTube, don't get me wrong. I enjoy watching all these documentaries about the war in Chirac and whoever's warring here in Memphis and stuff. They're interested to see from like a documentary point of view. But I'm not making any informed lifestyle decisions or personal choices based on what those people do or acting tough because of it. But it does remind me a lot of the people. There's a certain segment of guys who watch like UFC and MMA who kind of make it their part of their identity because they hope it makes them look hard and makes them look like they can fight. And I think it's the same thing with guys who talk aggressively and often about who snitched, why they snitched, should snitches be allowed back in the industry. It's fucking nonsense. Like, Gunna is still one of the best rappers in the scene. One of the most successful before the whole trial went. I'm sure even more successful now with all that attention on him. But people that just love the music, he's gonna do well. There's no way, shadow of doubt about it. And unfortunately, in this industry we're in, if you do well and your numbers hit, the industry will push you regardless because you're going to be good for business. So this idea that he's going to be blackballed and he's not going to sell records and shit is ridiculous. The guy sells records easily anyway, and now with this extra level of this extra storyline attached to his name, I'm sure it's only going to increase the intrigue. So that's never really going to happen in terms of him not being able to sell records. But I just find regular civilians' interest in who snitches and who doesn't snitches to be really ridiculous, kind of sad, and a bit corny, to be completely fair. But it is also an instinct and a clue here that Gunna is definitely looking to step out and ready to come back outside and be putting music out, because we're seeing pictures of him out and about. This is the slowest rollout I've seen so far post snitch, because I felt like once he did snitch on YSL that he was going to wait until the trial verdict to then go about restarting his career. But unfortunately, he's probably got his own mouth to feed, bills to pay, and just maybe music to tell, music to get out there and express. And he has to kind of get back out there and kind of, I won't say strike while his iron's hot, but just restart his life as it may be. And this is a good example of it, because he was recently spotted at a basketball game, sitting there chilling, and he obviously looks in rarely good nick. So one thing you could say for snitching is that if you want to snitch, it definitely does help in terms of your health. You definitely go on some sort of health glow up when you snitch. You want to come out looking completely different and maybe feeling different, sounding different, acting different, moving different based on the traumatic experience that you went through. But you can't help but feel sorry and sad for like Young Thug, knowing that Gunna is out here on the side of basketball games, chilling, having a good time with his friends, while Thug is in court, sweating his face off, looking really stressed, facing double-digit time in prison, and one of his kind of main guys who he brought through and responsible for kind of bringing up is out here, at basketball games, chilling, having a good time and shit. That's the real kind of bittersweet side of like living the street life and being a part of a gang, is that sometimes, your friends get off because they cooperate, you hold it down because you're really about that life, but then you end up with the far worse consequences in this, because now there's no option for you to do a plea deal or anything. You have to just sit there and take it to trial. So that's the only kind of sad thing in there. But Gunna is looking really good though. That's definitely good to be said. This is a second picture of him also. A fan bumped into him while she was walking around town, and he's definitely lost a ton of weight. I must say he's already lost 60 pounds clearly. He's even like, and you can tell he's lost a lot of weight because, you know, he's gotten rid of the chin strap. That's usually a first sign that guys lose a lot of weight. They start to take off the beard. There's no need for it because your jawline's already popping through, because the, you know, the skin, the weight loss on your face is already there. So he's definitely looking in great nick. I'm gonna say he lost about 60 pounds. Clearly, I think personally, it's about 60 pounds he's lost. But yeah, it's just a bit. That's the only thing that's a bit sad, bittersweet to see. If you're a fan of YSL as a label, to see Thug going through what he's going through, and to see Gunna out here striving, looking successful, gearing up for an album rollout. That's the only bittersweet side of things, to be honest. But this is the unfortunate real realities of living the street life. And yeah, only wish Thug the best. Free Slime. Hope he gets out soon. Going on from that one, but yeah, 60 people saying here. Tommy says, I'm making no switching, and UFC part of my family is alpha male thing. Cool, I agree with that one. Tashki says 60 pounds is a lot. Yeah, 60 pounds is a lot to lose in weight, but I think for most people, I think I've said it previously on here a lot of times, especially myself, you know, going through my weight loss journey and just in general being a fan of fashion. I've always said myself that I think the biggest glow up anyone can make is losing at least 30 to 60 pounds. I think if most people decided to just lose 30 to 60 pounds instead of buying new clothes or instead of buying Spanx and shit, you would have a major glow up. Like, the options that would open up for you, losing 30 to 60 pounds would be incredible. It doesn't matter, man or woman, lose 30 to 60 pounds and it will drastically change what you look like, how you carry yourself, what works on you, what you're willing to take a chance on. It can make such a big difference. But unfortunately, it's the hardest thing to do. The easiest thing to do is to buy Spanx, to buy tights, you know, whatever, to buy bigger, baggier clothing. But the hardest thing to do is to commit to a healthy diet, is to exercise, drink loads of water, cut out all the shit stuff. Like, that's the hard thing to do, really. But actually, if you make that effort, 30 to 60 pounds, it's impossible to look bad. Impossible to look bad after cutting 30 to 60 pounds, in my opinion. But what do I know? Next year, we got this clip or article, sorry, for courtesy of Complex, which I think is absolutely hilarious. It says New York lawyer has been fired after a video that accused him of snatching a black woman's wig. I'm not too sure on this because the color of the wig looks like it's not like a wig that someone would wear seriously. It looks like a wig you'd wear like as a part of a costume, but you know, maybe I don't know New York women too well. So it's courtesy of Complex. It says a New York City lawyer has been fired from his job after a viral TikTok video showed a black woman accused him of snatching her wig as she was walking down the street. As shown in the original video uploaded by Lizzie Ashley in the past week, the man is approached and asked why he allegedly pulled the wig off. So let me see if I can find it. Actually, I've got the video here actually that I pulled. So this is the video of the actual event, right? So let's see what actually happened. So this is the video of the post wig snatching occasion. And please, I'm going to lower a bit the volume, but if you've got headphones, please be careful because this woman is very, very screamy, all right, in terms of level of volume. So be prepared. She's going to scream.
Sir, for what fucking reason? For what reason? For what
Come on, let's go. Come on.
reason did you take my wig off?
Let's go back on one more.
Sir, for what fucking reason? For what reason? For what reason did you take my wig off? Because what made you think that was the good thing to do? What made you think that was the good thing to do? For what? For what? Why did you do that? What makes you think that that's okay? Is that funny? Is that funny? You don't even fucking know me. Do you hit women or something? Why did you take my wig off and keep walking?
His friend is trying to save him. My video keeps buffering, but his friend is trying to save him. Please apologize, please. He's saying no.
For what, sir? Why? Why?
She's not having it. Why is the video buffering so long?
Why did you take my wig off and just walk away. Because what?
Anyway, you get the gist of the video. She's screaming, she's screeching, she's not happy about it. Personally, for me, I think the wig looks, I don't know, it looks a bit fake, but maybe it was a wig that she was wearing daily. It's still an incredible intrusion of fucking private space and shit that people do that I don't understand. But it also kind of reminds me a little bit about this occasion that I had once walking out and about in London, going out somewhere, and this guy in front of us that we saw randomly just grabbed the woman's boob in front of us. She was wearing, if I remember correctly, she was wearing some sort of like a top that, you know, showed off her fucking cleavage and shit, and she had like glitter all over her top and stuff, and, you know, looking amazing and whatnot. But this guy had no business to do this. Like, she was literally, I think she must have, we saw her from afar. She was coming up to the guy in front of us, and he just reached out and grabbed her boob. Like, crazy shit. Just reached out and grabbed her boob like that as walking by. I'm thinking, like, what the fuck are you doing? Obviously, we kind of gave him some words and whatnot and told him how much of a creep and shit he was, and he kind of ran away. But I just remember thinking, like, why would the guy do that randomly? Someone's minding their business, going about what they're doing, and then you just randomly reach out and pull their shit. Same with this. Like, there's nothing worse than this, than the version of like somebody deciding to like take your hat off and shit. I know it's like kind of a thing that people do, especially boys, to the piss out of other guys' hairline. But for me, it's always been a bit of a triggering thing, where someone comes and takes my hat off and thinks it's funny. Like, I don't play those games. Like, that will legitimately make me want to fight somebody. Like, honestly, want to make me fight somebody. So I can only imagine if you're a woman and you've got your wig on and shit, you're already maybe having some complexes or whatever when it comes to your hair, or you just don't want people to fucking touch you. It's an invasion of privacy and personal space, all that malarkey, and they come around you as you're going on your way out or whatever, living your life, and they pull your fucking wig off, and they don't have the decency, when confronted, you just say sorry. That's also the thing that kind of gets me with these people. Like, you play these games to be funny, the other person doesn't find it funny, they call you out on it, and you can't even say sorry in the moment. Just be like, sorry, I'm really sorry, please, I didn't mean it, it was a moment of craziness, I was going dumb, whatever it may be. Just at least, even if the firing still happens in the video, just be like, hey, I'm really sorry to you as a person, I know I hurt your feelings, can you forgive me? Like, that is a great way to kind of go about life, in terms of, look, I learned my lesson, I was doing too much there, it won't happen again, I apologize. Nah, just the smug, entitled, douchebag smile that for the most part tells me a lot of these guys, there's girls even that do this sort of thing also, attitude wise, it's just people who've never kind of had any real consequences in life, in terms of, you chat shit, you get banged. Like, this guy has definitely never been punched in the face before for saying something stupid. You just kind of get allowed to say what you just get let off to say what you want because of your position, because of who you are, because of your friendship circle. No one wants to do confrontation and shit, but sometimes getting punched in the face from time to time growing up can definitely help to kind of iron out these people. But the real consequence is definitely this article, because it said he's been fired, right? So as it continues here, it kind of describes the video which we already watched. But if we scroll down here, it tells us in the comments for the video, which is now almost 60,000 likes and has over 4,000 comments, users were able to determine the identity of the man, and he was called, this is his name, I'm not going to say it here, his name and picture appeared on the website of this law agency where he is listed as an associate. He has since been removed from the site. So I guess people were just bombarding this law firm, and eventually they kind of, you know, basically fired him. In a post shared on his LinkedIn account, the law firm confirmed that the person is no longer employed there. He says, we've been made aware of the video of the non-work related incident involving one of our associates. We take this seriously. Inappropriate behavior by any employee, whether inside or outside the workplace, and the associate is no longer working at this firm. So this is ridiculously, this is definitely one of those accounts of like, chat shit, get banged, and consequences have, you know, consequence culture as opposed to cancel culture, because this was so unnecessary, so unneeded. There was no real reason for him to do this in the slightest. A moment of madness, a moment of douchebagness, and instead of just saying sorry in a moment, he felt entitled enough to kind of just smile and smug at it. Even at the behest of his friends, he still did it. And this again is further proof to me, because I think there's a lot of like women, especially on Twitter for the most part, who kind of chastise men and tell them they need to get better friends and call them out. This is a clear example of it. Most douchebag guys have friends that are sensible and tell them not to do douchebag things, but they continue to do so. And like most people, if you're friends with somebody, you just at some point you're like, you know what, I'm not going to keep going on at you about this thing. I'm just going to enjoy you for your friendship and the things that I like, and the things that I don't like, I'm just not going to pay attention to it because you're beyond help. I keep telling you not to do that, but you keep doing it. So there are some people that have those type of friendships where you might pull up your friend a couple of times and say, hey, stop, doing this when we're out. Stop scaring away all the hoes. Stop being annoying. Stop being this, stop being that. And they don't. Sometimes you break off communication, or sometimes you just learn how to kind of deal with them in small doses. And in this occasion, the friend was trying his best. Bro, please stop. That's his friend's hands there. Please stop. Just say sorry, bro. That's not cool. Say sorry. He's just like smiling at him. Why should I say sorry, bro? I did nothing wrong, bro. I did nothing wrong. And now look, you've been fired over some nonsense like this. So, he deserved it anyway, shape or form. Should say sorry in a moment. And also keep your hands to yourself. Keep your bloody hands to yourself. Moving on from this, I want to quickly touch upon this quickly as I end the show. I want to know, right? What is the deal? I wonder what the deal is. I maybe have to kind of look into it a little bit further. I wonder what the deal is with Amber Heard and Johnny Depp issue and trial and shit. Because the reason why I mentioned is because at the top of the show, I mentioned I went to like a panel discussion place. And one of the people on the panel, this comedian called Grace Campbell, seemed to have a real bee in her bonnet with men that she's dated in the past or known, who essentially she described that, they kind of used the whole Amber Heard verdict as an excuse to say all women lie about occurrences of rape and abuse and whatnot in relationships, because obviously in that case, Amber Heard got, proven in a court of law to maybe not be telling the truth in terms of how she painted the relationship, and Johnny Depp came out as the non-guilty party of it. But I think anybody with eyes and with sense could see from the evidence that they presented in court that both people were super toxic and they had no business being in a relationship with each other. They brought the worst out of each other, and they were both abusive in their own ways. Maybe Johnny Depp wasn't as physically abusive as Amber Heard said she was, but he definitely did things to her that you would be classified as abusive. But I think both parties were as bad as each other, clearly, in that case. But for some reason, it seems to be a case that still divides opinion so much. So even though Johnny Depp got found innocent in a court of law of whatever Amber Heard accused him of, it still is something that people, fans alike, just have their own impression of what happened and what occurred. I'm not really too sure why that is, because I don't feel like this is something to waste energy on, because I feel like both people personally, in relationship wise, seem like to be terrible people. So I don't know why anybody's capping for anyone. Whether you're a Johnny Depp fan or Amber Heard fan, I don't see why you would go extra hard for either party when they both seem to be quite deplorable. Like, maybe it's just me. I think they're both pretty deplorable in terms of how they acted and went on about life. Like I don't understand why people are like rallying behind Amber Heard, because she's probably not the greatest person to kind of put your hat on. Same goes for fucking Johnny Depp. But regardless, is what it is. This article here, courtesy of Paychicks, again, is interesting because there's this constant need in the media now, narrative, to try and play one off the other. So whenever Johnny Depp has a good thing happening in media, an opposite article will come out bashing him. And when another thing happens with Amber Heard, the opposite part will come bash. So it's kind of like a tennis match. It never ends. And I'm wondering if it is ever going to end. And we're kind of going to get to a stage where we just stop hearing about these people in general. And we just hear about them when they have movies or TV shows out. Because now this headline goes to page 6. It says Amber Heard beams in a new home in Madrid as ex-Johnny Depp cancels tour of her injury. Like, what does one have to do with the other? The fact that Amber Heard is in Madrid now living life, what does it have to do with Johnny Depp cancelling his tour? I don't know. But they keep playing them over each other and keep making it into a thing. But the article says Amber Heard's happiness can't be contained. Clearly, they're in the pocket of the Heard camp there. Now that she's living in Spain, the Aquaman actress ventured out to a book fair with a friend in Madrid on Sunday and couldn't keep a smile off her face. Dressed in head to toe black, Heard walked around with goodies from her fair as she carried 3 totes filled with books. The rum-dies actress, 37, who reportedly quit Hollywood to live in Spain capital with a 2-year-old, wore her hair in a ponytail and also had a visor on. Heard had no problem showing off beautiful teeth as she grinned. What kind of article is this? And she grinned and chatted with her pal. Who fucking writ this? Her best friend, Francesca Bacardi. Yo, you need to chill. Her beautiful teeth. What? Okay, that's her there walking in the thing. Obviously out there in Spain. Talking Espanol with the peoples. Actress Pearly White's a far cry from her ex-husband Johnny Depp is working with in the dental department. The pirates are like, oh no, they did him dirty. They're comparing the teeth. They're comparing Johnny Depp's Marlboro Lights stained teeth and Amber Heard's, gorgeous turkey chompers. Or Colombian chompers, or maybe or Bel Air chompers, right? She probably got them from some clinic somewhere in Bel Air. God almighty, mate, absolutely insane. The Pirates of the Caribbean recently star kept under fire of having brown teeth. Appeared to be rotting at the premiere of his film Genou de Barry at 2003 Cannes Film Festival. The thing about Johnny Depp's teeth that surprised me was just that you don't really see it. I think because I'm so used to consuming content from like the black side of things, like when it comes to like black, entertainment, like urban stuff and hip hop and whatnot, especially UK and US. A lot of people in that field, and sometimes a lot of people involved in like the trashier sides of reality TV, they've all got fake teeth on, right? They've all got fucking porcelain white chompers in from Turkey or from Colombia or whatnot. So when you do see somebody in Hollywood, conventional Hollywood, who hasn't got veneers, it's just strange to see like regular, teeth, like just falling how they do. Janky, crooked, yellow, or stained. It takes you a while because I'm so used to seeing girls from like Bad Girls Club, rappers, people from like, Keep Vanderpump Rules. All these people all have fucking perfect, white smiles because they get their teeth their real teeth sawed down and get fucking caps put on them and to cover them up and shit. So when you see an actual person with actual real teeth, like what actual real people everyday life normally have, more so, it takes you aback because, you're used to seeing everybody in the entertainment industry going out of their way to get 30,000 plus worths of teeth put into their mouth and shit. But yeah, his teeth are a madness, to be fair. I don't actually blame them from the New York Post highlighting them, because to be a Hollywood star at that level and have your front, it's one thing if you have a couple of ones on the sides that are a little bit stained, but to have the ones in the front all stained like that, that's a lot of whiskey. That's a lot of like chewing tobacco. That's maybe a lot of H, right? That might be a lot of H. That might be I don't know, some other shit. That might be a lot of booty holes. That's a lot of life in those mouth, right? That's definitely somebody that has hung out with a few comedians. Because he looks crazy. Yo. And then we continue. Look at it. The zoom in. Oh my God. Look at the zoom. Yo, the zoom is crazy. Look at that zoom. The front teeth is crazy. The lack of lip balm is mad as well. It's pretty crazy, isn't it, right? White people don't like to moisturize. They don't like to use any kind of, lip conditioner or anything. It's like, fucking hell. Anyway, although fans suspected that Depp's chompers were decaying, celebrity dentist Appa told Dr. Page 6 that the brown spots were actually a result of aggressive wear. The Depp's teeth aren't the only thing preventing him from smiling these days. The rocker, 59, has recently forced to postpone his band's tour as he recovers from a painful ankle injury. Okay, cool. Anyway, we get it. There he is. Imagine paying tickets to see Johnny Depp's band perform live. That's some next level thing. But anyway, I don't know. I think it's weird. I think the media playing them off of each other and is odd. People standing and for either party is really strange. Also, I think they're both pretty reprehensible in their own ways. This is a wild way to carry your phone in Madrid, though. To be fair, like she's just asking to get pickpocketed. Like Madrid people don't play. That's not a place to go and just walk around with your phone like that in the open. That's some white privilege shit. She must have been in a good area or next to some fucking big security guards, or a house is right around the corner, because you can't be carrying your phone around on some massive bit of rope like that as a handbag on the side of you. Like in Madrid, that'll get snatched, to be fair. But hey, what do I know? So, big up Amber Heard, big up Johnny Depp. Anybody that's going out their way to kind of stand both of them is weird, because I feel like they're both pretty horrendous people to be in relationships with, clearly. And I don't know, I feel like it's not really that controversial of a statement to make, really, but for some reason, anytime their names come up in public, women especially seem to have a very visceral reaction in terms of like wanting to hate Johnny Depp, and also hating guys who maybe see his little win as some sort of moral victory for men. Because I feel like for them women, and what I've heard, they feel like guys are doing it as an excuse to basically say, oh, all women lie, which I don't think they are doing. But, you know, I get the rationale, I get where it's coming from, but I just think everyone just needs to chill out and relax. It's not that deep, personally. That's what I think. But hey, what do I know? Anyway, that has been the Agostinho Zinga Show, episode number 678. Thanks so much for tuning in. If it's your first time checking out the show, I do appreciate it, as per usual. If you want to see some more stuff regarding myself, click the links in the description below. Website link, there'll be a link to my social media all there, and some other links as well to articles that I spoke about in the pod. If you want to kind of check those over too, you can check that out on there as well. So I do appreciate that. If you're listening to this via the audio side of the podcast, you will hear my tune of the day playing underneath this as a little bed before I kind of outro out. And for everybody else tuning into the show live, please come back in, I guess 10 minutes or so. I'll set up the next stream for Random Show. So if you want to know more stuff about the comedy stuff, and I'll try and get through some new stuff or some old stuff that I didn't get before, and obviously cover some new stuff that I can cover here and there. So Random Show will be coming up right after this. But for now, this has been the end of the Agostinho Zinga Show, episode number 678. If you've enjoyed it, please make sure you smash the like button down below for me. If you're listening via the audio side of the platform, please make sure you leave me a 5-star review. That's all I ask, and I'll be greatly appreciated. But for now, take care, my friends. I appreciate everybody in the stream chat for hanging in there. I'll be back very, very soon. Take care, everybody. It's been amazing. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Be safe and be well, my friends. Peace.